who live for peace and not violence, and told us to be the change we wish to see in the world. Freedom's calling, I feel the fire that's deep inside us. Everybody wants change, but tell me who will guide us. To the leaders that pass away, put up your lighters. It's a beautiful struggle, but it cannot divide us. We're the ones that we've always been waiting for. See yourself in the mirror and open up the door. Walk through it and feel the...
Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. It is your boy Chris Shule, the chocolate Nubian soul brother. That's what I've been calling myself, Sasha. We got Sasha in the house over here. Sasha is an extraordinary woman. She is a radio host, podcaster, businesswoman. She's in the top 50 successful business influential people of 2019. I met her at the what was the name of the program?
Australian Teenage Expo.
Australian Teenage Expo. It's been a few years now, but yeah, she invited me to perform there a few years back, and got to meet her and a whole bunch of other amazing performers, and we kept in touch ever since. Sasha has been involved in amazing projects over the last few years, working with the youth in a lot of areas. Sasha, it's been a crazy year. I know things have been rough, well, for a lot of us, including yourself. And I wanted to have you here just to talk about all the amazing things you've been working on, and yeah, perhaps talk about, I guess, how to perhaps deal with all the struggles that we're encountering now. Because I know this is something that I think you've had a lot of experience with, dealing with teenagers that are going through issues. I mean, this is part of what you do, so I'd love to get your perspective. So, Sasha, what's been happening with you? What's news?
Oh, well, I mean, I have no job. So,
you and many
like,
Australians,
this whole COVID thing has completely destroyed my job, completely destroyed my business. I've gone from a person that, travels probably overseas 5-6 times a year, to America to New Zealand, travel all over Australia. I probably speak at about 150 gigs a year to 0. I'm homeschooling 2 kids that don't want to be homeschooled by me. So everything is just crashed and burned in my life because of freaking Corona. Like, seriously, I mean, you couldn't even predict it. But
exactly. I feel like
I would have to say it's a roller coaster ride. Like, I can't say that I've been great all the time. There's been times where I've cried my eyes out and felt so lonely and thought, what's going to happen after this? And then there's days where you go, no, I'm going to be okay. And so it's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, and I know you're a really positive person, and I think it's really important to have a positive outlook. But I think one of the great things about having you on here is I think people feel it's easier to deal with things when they can see someone like yourself, so that is a strong woman, dealing with these difficult situations. The fact of the matter is that there's so many people right now that are feeling the effects of these lockdowns. They've had their businesses ruined, lost their jobs. I'm in that same situation. Look, granted, it's a bit more complicated with me. I essentially had to leave because I've been suffering from a vocal condition, but I haven't been able to do a lot of work that I usually do. I'm a performer, singer, entertainer, and I've lost a lot of work there. And of course, not being able to have contact with people, there is an emotional toll. And I just watched a news report just the other day talking about how apparently 14% of people that did this survey were expressing suicidal signs at the moment. And apparently the suicide rates increased exponentially just over the last few months, ever since this thing ensued. So whereas obviously we're trying to focus on initially it was flattening the curve. Now it's trying to ensure this thing doesn't get out of hand. I don't know what the narrative is right now, but I feel like we're overlooking the human story to this. The fact that this is obviously affecting people like you and I. I mean, you mentioned that you were in tears just early this year, and I'm sure that comes with. I mean, I know your business is your life. You have a very successful business. You've been doing this work for some time now. And as you mentioned, you can't travel. And I'm not only concerned about the not being able to travel right now, but one, how long this is going to last. And when we do eventually are in a position where we can travel, I mean, how practical is this going to be? I've been hearing talk about how they're going to be having this new policy now where you can't travel unless you've been vaccinated, you've gone through all of these procedures, you have some kind of transport identification to show that you've gotten all your vaccines. And anytime there is something that happens in the world that is monumentous, like 9/11, there are a lot of changes that take place. And I'm always worried how that's going to impact normal today citizens. So, I mean, these are just some of my ramblings at the moment, but are you, you mentioned you're schooling your kids at the moment. I mean, how much has this affected your day-to-day routine at the moment?
Oh, it's affected it to everything. I'm literally not leaving the house because, I mean, obviously, just like everybody else, but when I say I'm homeschooling my kids, I'm at home and I've got them, I'm doing their education completely. They've got incredible teachers, and I've got an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. Actually, just turned 7 a couple of days ago,
Oh, wow.
and it's just. I mean, you would have met me, and I think I was pregnant when I first saw you, to the first child, let alone the second child. That's how long I've known you. So, and it's completely changed me. It's completely changed my life. I think I miss lots of things. There's so much that I miss. I probably miss, other than the fact that it's affected my income, other than the fact that it's affected my family, I guess personally it's affected me because I'm not having any contact. I'm a contact person. Mm-hmm. Firstly, I'm affectionate, so I love hugs. When I see someone, I'm Italian, so, not that is a thing, but, when I see you, I've got to give you a bear hug. I've got to love you. Like, I've got so much love to give that I want to give you a hug. I want to give you a kiss. I'm the kind of person that walks in, I give you a kiss, I go to the shop, I come back, I give you another kiss to say hello, goodbye, da-da-da. I'm
Absolutely.
very affectionate in that way. So the fact that I'm not having that human contact with people, that's actually been really, really difficult. Just even when you do see somebody, what do you do when you go up to them and say hi? Like,
I
in
had this
business,
experience
recently.
I'm
big on a handshake. I'm big on a handshake. Like, hey, how you doing? My name is Sacha. What's your name? And there has to be some sort of physical contact to be able to do that. And I'm kind of feeling like it's weird to go up to somebody and go, hi.
Yeah. Or even just walking down the road. People move to the side of the road just to avoid you. And sometimes, I mean, you don't know if they're doing it out of courtesy or if they're scared. And you don't know how to respond to it. It's a weird dynamic that's going on.
And I think, how long does this last? Because you've still got those people that are germaphobes, and that, I'm not a germaphobe, but I've always been an obsessive hand washer. Mm-hmm. And, but to the point where I'm now saying to my kids when I go out, don't touch anything. Don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I feel like, am I creating a generation of kids that are, scared of germs? But I'm saying that now, what are the long-term effects once this is over? Yeah. Once we get back to normal, are we still going to be walking around with, oh, absolutely. Look, I've not had this entire time. I've not watched the news once. I've not had the TV on at all.
When you say entire time, are we talking about the last couple of months, 3 months? Like,
since March. So whatever. That's I've not watched the news once.
Well, that's probably a good idea because there's a lot of fear mongering going on right now.
Well, I mean, I get I get what I need. My friends will tell me. I get the emails from the school to say we're not going. So that's all I need to know. But I don't need to know how many cases there are per day. All I need to know is that I need to stay at home. I need to make sure that I look after my family. I need to make sure that I stay home to look after your family, more or less.
Well, let's talk
I'm
about
actually
that.
doing that.
Because
I'm doing that for you more. Because I have to tell you, originally when they said little kids couldn't get it and people that were healthy couldn't get it, I'm a really healthy person. I'm relatively healthy, and my husband's healthy. My kids are really healthy, and I don't have any parents. So I've lost both of my parents, and my husband's parents are overseas at the moment and got stuck there, so can't come back. And they live in a big compound, so they're really safe in what they're doing. So effectively, I don't have that that thing over my head of
what's going to happen
I have to look after somebody. What's going to happen to my parents? Because I know people would be living in fear. So I'm really doing that for your parents. I'm doing this completely for you. And I actually have a medical condition, believe it or not, to not be able to wear a mask. And for some reason, my whole life, I've suffered from blood noses. Like all the time, I get a blood nose at least once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been out 3 times in the last week. And those, the 2 times that I wore a mask, and the last time I wore a mask only for 5 minutes because I was in and out.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2 times I did get a blood nose. So I don't want to be a Karen because I'm certainly not one of those.
Sure.
But this is really going to affect me in a different way. Like, I'm really thinking about, I can't be out too long because I need to wear that mask, and, you know, what do I do? Because it does affect. And all of a sudden, my son said to me, "Mum, you've got blood everywhere." I'm like, I'm in the supermarket going, "What? Oh my God!" Like,
well, you know, because we've spoken
awful.
about this, Sasha, but you don't have to wear. I mean, this is from the Department of Health, you know, the Human Services. This is the website that there are exemptions for wearing a mask. But I imagine, like most people, you're probably apprehensive about not wearing one. Not even necessarily because of the police pressure, but the societal pressure. I mean, have you ever not worn your mask when you've gone outside? Because obviously you have a legitimate exemption. And what are your thoughts on?
No, look, I've
complying?
gone walking in the park and
Yeah.
been alone and taken it off.
Mhm.
And I've tried to wear scarves and different things to kind of combat that. But it's really difficult to kind of go, I'm not a Karen, and I'm not
What do
one
you
of these
mean? You're
people
not a
that say,
Karen?
no, I don't want. Well, you know how they call it that Karen is that person that's going, you know, I refuse to wear a mask. It's wrong to wear a mask.
Gotcha.
You can't take away my
Gotcha.
freedom.
Okay.
I'm not one of those people.
All right.
I'm not. I'm staying home to protect everybody else.
Okay. Well,
Do you know the
let's
other thing
explore
that I'm
that.
actually finding? The
Cause-
other thing that I'm finding, I live right near
Mhm.
a COVID testing unit, and
Okay.
there are big signs everywhere saying, "Please be kind.
Sure.
Please be kind to the medical staff." And what really bothers me is that we have to have huge neon lights up right now saying, "Please be kind." Like, what kind of world have we come into that we have to spend money? Our council needs to spend money to put up massive neon lights to say, "Please be kind to our medical staff." Isn't that just a normal thing?
Yeah. Do you think people aren't being kind? I mean, is that what you mentioned you haven't watching much of the news, but I know there's definitely been a lot of people that have
Yeah.
been resisting what's going on for various reasons. We can get into that. But in regards to the medical stuff, I thought most people had the idea of, look, these guys are obviously trying to help people. Hey, let's show some respect. Or do you think a lot of people have been showing a lot of disrespect towards the medical staff?
Well, clearly, if they've got to put big neon signs up to say, "Please be kind," people have been disrespectful. And it's not them that's doing it. They're doing a job. They're going to work every single day like everybody else, and they're being paid. And luckily that they have a job, because they're what's keeping our economy going. Because it's
Sure.
not me that's keeping the economy going. It's them.
Mhm.
So we're grateful for those staff that are out there going to work every day, putting themselves on the line, and then going out and spending their money to keep our economy going.
Sure, sure. Well, let's talk about the mask thing, because look, you're someone that obviously legitimately has a condition, and do you see, the thing that concerns me is that when people like you are in a situation where it's significantly going to affect your health, and you're perhaps, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but you're apprehensive about not wearing a mask, and you're doing this obviously because you want to help people, you want to make sure that you can reduce the chances of spreading this thing. I think about all these other situations of people that do have legitimate excuses, like they suffer from asthma or they just have breathing problems, and because of this societal or police pressure to wear this thing that's not going to be in their best interest, it's going to put themselves at risk. And then you look at this with a bit more nuance. I mean, you have a look at this on a greater scale. The fact that there are people that need to have contact, the people that are going to be significantly affected by not being able to interact with people. The fact that everyone's wearing masks every day, and that does have a social impact. The fact that we're seeing suicide rates go up through the roof because of this. And granted, on one hand, we're saying we're doing this in order to save lives. I mean, realistically, if we're being objective about this, these lockdowns that we're having, these restrictions that we're putting in place, like the mask, the staying at home for who knows how long, that's also having the effect of actually causing many deaths as well. So I feel like on one side, the media just wants to focus on this one issue of, let's do this thing, stop being selfish, but realistically, it's selfish to expect people to comply, even though it's at their detriment to their own health and at the detriment of many other people that suffer from mental illnesses. And I happen to know people that, because of these lockdowns, because of these measures, they feel like they don't have any reason to live. There's no social contact, and their businesses have been ruined. So, I mean, what do we put more focus on here? Do we just put focus on one thing, even though the other, which is resulting in many deaths through suicides, is even causing more deaths? It's very tricky, I think, if you're trying to consider how your actions are affecting other people. I mean, because like with you, what's your general feeling in regards to this whole mask thing? I mean, do you want to wear this regardless of the fact that, I mean, like you mentioned, you don't want to go out, but obviously it's not going to be good for your health if you're not going out and exercising. And I'd imagine if you're constantly feeling this pressure to put on a mask, that's not going to be too healthy for you either. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I'm trying not to stay out too long because the last thing you want is my blood all over the supermarket. Like that's the last thing that you want, and that's the last thing I want. So I'm sure as a person you would, if you saw all of a sudden a mask and it was red, you'd be like, sorry. And I didn't even know. I thought my nose was running. Like I thought, because when you wear the mask, you you sniffle a lot.
Sure.
I actually thought my nose was running. I didn't actually realise until my son said that to me. But I get one of the things that is detrimental that I think that people really need to focus on is my mum was looking after a lady who was 90 years old, and when my mum passed away, she's an older lady. She's a widow. And she's all alone, and my mum would go and visit her and be with her, and they were very good friends. And since my mum's passed away, I've kind of taken over that role, and I cook for her once a week, and I take her food, and I do this. But since all of this lockdown, I actually can't do that. And she's a very fit and healthy 90-year-old and can still go down to the shops on her own and, lead a quite independent life. But she actually... I call her quite frequently, and she said to me the other days, if this is the last year of my life, how lonely has it been? Like she said, I'm effectively staying alone to keep myself alive, to be alone, to feel alone, to not want to live.
Sure.
But I'm staying so do you kind of get the...
I totally get the point.
The weirdness, like she's staying alone to keep alive, to stay alive, to not want to live.
Exactly. I mean, what's the point of
so
living
lonely.
if life isn't worth living because of the current conditions?
Yeah, so exactly right. And that's actually really made me think. And I just thought to myself, like, you've lived 90 years and then your last one, you've lived the last 6 months of it by yourself, all alone, depressed. Like,
sure.
Is that the way that you want to live?
Yeah, that's the question I've been asking myself a lot lately, because whereas I think most people, if this is something that is going to last for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, like I think a lot of us thought it would last. Initially, it was, let's flatten the curve. We've got to do this to keep the curve down. But they're talking about having this thing last till the end of Christmas or even longer. And I was seeing, I saw an article just a while ago about how the Premier is being advised by experts to consider locking down Victoria for 2 years. So
I can't even speak when you say that. I can't even speak.
Yeah, and then there's talk of bringing ourselves into we're in stage 3. I think we're in stage 4 now. I mean, what next? I mean, if this is a situation where this is maybe going on for a few weeks, I can understand how people would be inclined to go ahead with that. But the problem I have is that I see a situation where our freedoms are slowly being encroached on, and it's all under this idea of we got to keep everyone safe. We got to flatten the curve. And I try to be as objective as I can about this thing. And if we're looking at the statistics, I know maybe you haven't been watching the news as much as I have. Like, I've been glued to the news because of this. But one of the things that I'm noticing is, granted that there's this perception that this is incredibly dangerous because of the potential for this to be a serious issue. Granted, I give you that. But when you actually have a look at the figures, you have a look at the amount of people that are dying, and then you have a look at the amount of tests that are being carried out. It's very easy to see. Obviously, we're doing a lot more testing, but the mortality rate that we're seeing is pretty much in line with the same mortality rate we were seeing last year for the seasonal flu. And the people that
absolutely.
So to me, it's kind of crazy because all of a sudden, I feel like the flu has become this serious thing. Now we're suddenly worrying about the elderly dying, when if we're being objective about this, every other year, particularly 2018, when we had like a really bad case of the flu, this stuff was never really covered. And it's this weird situation now where, because of these deaths, which are essentially deaths related to the flu, I mean, all the symptoms are pretty much the same as what you find with a very bad case of influenza. Now there's this perception that we need to apply all these serious measures because there's so many people dying. We're having 9, 10, 15 people, and this is typically what happens every year in Australia. And granted, if this was a case like we saw in Italy, like I'm sure you would have, I'm not sure if you watched what was going on in Italy, Sasha, but you had hundreds, 1,000 people dying. I would be one of these people that you wouldn't be needing to tell to stay at home. But we're seeing a case where there's so many few people dying. People that typically, and of course I feel for the elderly just like anyone else does. I have a dad that's in an aged care facility, and he's one of the people that's going to be at risk, if he gets infected. But the reality is the people of that age, within the 70s, 80s, 90s, typically speaking, when they get sick and they have other medical conditions, they're the ones that are most at risk. And every single year you have deaths. You have a large number of deaths within these aged care facilities. But now, all of a sudden, it's this situation where it's so serious that we now need to put all these restrictions in place that are, one, destroying the economy, destroying people's businesses like yourself, and causing all of these mental problems. And now the suicide rate is gone. It's gone up by hundreds of %. I mean, apparently they mentioned, this is from Channel 9 News, just yesterday, they said that the amount of suicides is 3 times more than the amount of deaths from COVID because of this thing.
Wow.
So it makes you think, well, at what cost are you willing to potentially save lives? And this is my whole issue with this, because on one hand, this thing is so incredibly dangerous, therefore we need to stop being selfish and wear these masks and have all these social isolation procedures, but by those measures we're actually doing more harm, not only to these people that are dying because they need to have contact, but then the economic effect. I mean, we're billions of dollars, I believe trillions of dollars in debt at the moment, and this is the kind of stuff that we're going to have to wear as a community, particularly the youth at some point. Money isn't created out of, I mean, essentially the people say, the government's looking after us. Absolutely. They're obviously assisting us, but they are essentially making money out of thin air. They're printing lots and lots of money, and realistically what happens is that devalues, obviously, the dollar of people that have been saving for a long time. And I mean, it's something that at some point we're going to have to recover. So there's definitely a cost to the decisions that we're making, and I feel like on one hand we're just focusing on this from one perspective. Got to flatten the curve. Got to make sure that people don't die. But the figures that we are seeing are just going with the figures that we're seeing from mainstream news. Don't reflect something that would warrant, like, it's not a proportionate response based off of what we're seeing. So
absolutely. I completely understand. But then I try and look at it from somebody else's point of view that has somebody in an aged care facility that is being put at risk, and nobody wants them to experience that.
Absolutely.
And nobody wants them to experience that kind of thing. I mean, the thought of having some sort of virus that effectively stops me from breathing is probably my worst nightmare.
Yeah, well, that's my situation. But look at this. Just as of May this year, they put through a policy now where you are not allowed to visit people within aged care facilities, okay? Unless, I mean, this is just a flat-out rule for some of the, I mean, granted, the government said they've put some conditions here, but for some of these aged care facilities, they're not allowing visitors. And then others, they have some very stringent regulations, like you can't go in there unless, of course, you've been vaccinated. There are some people that do often have like adverse reactions to the vaccines. I mean, I actually got a medical exemption, but the point is, there are a lot of people that have not been able to visit their parents because of these restrictions. People haven't been able to go to go to funerals, and the same
Yeah.
people I think that have the most to fear from what could potentially happen to their parents, you find a lot of them, including myself, are the ones that aren't really in line with a lot of these procedures. Because who wants to be in a situation where you can't even hug your loved ones, you can't even go and see them, and this is all being done in order to protect them, when realistically, if we're being objective about this thing, the amount of, I mean, just the effects of what we're seeing, the amount of people that are dying, even though it's portrayed as being so incredible. I mean, we tend to look at the cases of COVID, like people that actually have this disease, and granted, the cases are very high. The majority of people are asymptomatic, meaning that they don't even have any symptoms whatsoever. And as of course, we're saying that this is a massive problem because everyone's infecting lots and lots of people, but the amount of people that are actually dying, and I'm not trying to play this down, this is just going with the actual figures we're seeing, it still is in line with what we are seeing every single year. Particularly 2018 was far worse as far as the amount of deaths. If this was maybe 100, 200, 1,000 deaths or something, I'd be saying this is serious. But one, we're seeing numbers that don't, in my opinion, like justify this kind of reaction. So there's that. And then you have a look at even the way that they're carrying these tests. Like, there are so many cases that are false positives. I mean, this is something that I'm just finding in mainstream news. Like, there are actually a lot of people that are being tested for COVID, and then they find out later that they don't have these things. And even the requirements for someone to have died from COVID, we're finding that even if you, let's say, like George Floyd, like, we haven't even spoken about the riots that have been going on. This blew my mind when I found out about this. But George Floyd actually technically should have died from corona because he had COVID in his system. But because of, obviously we all know that didn't happen, that he died by the hands of a police officer that had his, knee to his neck. That was the result of it. But it would have been easy, and this is one of the arguments that they could have made, that this guy died from COVID because of the regulations now. Like, even if you have COVID in your system and you haven't directly died from it, it's been recorded as COVID. So we're seeing this inflation of the numbers, and I guess all I'm trying to say is I don't know if this is an appropriate response for the amount of people that are dying. But I hear your point that obviously you have to you can understand how people that have someone to lose would be worried about people not doing everything they can to prevent the spread of this. But a lot of those people, like myself, are more worried that it's taking away that human connection. But I don't know, it's just something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I know you're from Italy. You mentioned your parents aren't obviously around anymore, but do you have any friends in Italy that have been affected by what went on?
Yeah, I have lots of cousins that are still in Italy, and we've been talking quite frequently. And we've been doing a whole lot of Zoom calls and chatting. And actually, my cousin lives in an apartment building where somebody committed suicide above his apartment and jumped off because of being in so much isolation, and was just not coping well with it. Had some mental health problems beforehand, and then with the whole corona thing, I mean, they were really strict. Like, they literally could not go out for a walk.
Yeah, well, it was really bad there.
For months, and they have very small houses.
Okay.
So it's kind of, absolutely.
Older population as
and
well.
It was older population. It was kind of like, if you imagine what it would be like the towers, the towers in Flemington and North Melbourne here. That was something that was really dear to my heart. Made sure that my family, my kids and I went down and volunteered for the day down there, and made sure that we took down some supplies, because I thought that was really an important thing, because that's just a place where corona could spread, and people are very easy to blame. You're not doing this, you're not doing that. But when you've got a whole lot of people living in a really small confined space, you're going to get a whole lot of things spread very, very easily and very, very quickly. So I thought that was a really important cause to be able to help like that. I think that, the riots in America have affected me greatly, because I traveled there and I have lots of friends there. And the fact that the community has completely changed. I've got people that are saying to me, I've spent a lot of time in New York in my life, and I've never felt unsafe there. I'll walk around anywhere and not feel unsafe, and I've never felt scared or anything like that. And I've walked around day, nights, busy streets, not many streets in Midtown, downtown, all of that sort of stuff. And I've never felt frightened. And I'm having people tell me now that it's actually quite frightening. And that affects me because I'd almost classify that as my second home. And I have lots of really close friends there and great friendships that I've not, that are feeling impacted by that. And I think that it was definitely all those riots is just been a big effect of the way that people were treated so differently in different communities, which was just horrific, which was just really an example of what's been going on there for 400-500 years.
Sure. I feel like it was the perfect storm, though, for that to happen. I mean, the fact that people have been locked up for so long in their homes, then they're, because of the economy, not being able, having the businesses ruined, and then on top of that, seeing this horrible act take place. I mean, that all builds up. I think there are a lot of things that are adding to that, but it spurred something that's still going on at the moment. And I'm just
absolutely
thinking about
and
the
it'll
things
go
that are
on
taking
for
place,
a really long time. It'll go on for a really long time but it's really important that people speak up about it and people speak up and say their opinions and what they feel and understand other people's point of view and have empathy. And, look, and I kind of have heard lots of people, when it comes to racism, I'm always the person that doesn't say, but this, but that, but this. You can never understand what that person's experienced until you've actually experienced it yourself. So there shouldn't be, they shouldn't be doing this, they shouldn't be rioting. In my opinion, it was the white person that started the riots in the first place that long ago, and I've been really
are we talking
looking
about
at a whole lot of
like what happened to George Floyd, the police officer? Or are we talking about the history of the United States,
Absolutely. Like when I look at that, I think it was the white person that actually came in and was really violent.
Sure.
And so therefore with that takes on a whole lot of time, and then you get to 2020 and then people say, well, why aren't you rioting peacefully? Well, why look at what you've done in the last 400 years. How can you possibly think that you would expect us to do that in another sense?
Do you personally feel responsible for things that, because you're from Italian ancestry, and obviously you never had any slaves, and I'm pretty sure your ancestors probably didn't, and I certainly never picked any cotton. And my ancestors are actually from the Ashanti Empire that had a 1,000-year reign of slavery, and they dealt with their own iniquities, you know what I mean? So I guess what the point I'm trying to make is, do you personally feel responsible for the things that the people that I guess you may identify with? Because when you say white, obviously we're talking about different ethnic groups here, and I don't know how you feel about your connection to the people in the United States, but do you feel some kind of culpability for what people that are maybe not even connected to you have done? Because I think this is what it all comes down to. This responsibility for actions that other people that are just connected to you by skin color have done.
So I actually I'm very, very passionate about this topic. I'm very passionate about white privilege and how people feel about this and taking responsibility. Without knowing, I have white privilege without knowing, and I have been able to see that many times in my life. And even though I'm not a person that takes it and uses it or does anything, but without knowing, I do have it. And so therefore, if I have it and I utilize it within my life, I must also take responsibility, because I have the white privilege because of what my ancestors have given me.
Okay, but when you say
my
utilize
ancestors have given.
How do you utilize it per se, specifically?
So therefore, if I'm going to have white privilege in my life, and I'll give you an example of how the biggest lesson that came into my life. If I'm going to have white privilege in my life without me even knowing it, I must also accept the responsibility that my heritage, whether it actually be me or even my own family, but I do have to accept the responsibility of what people before me have done to other people in order to have that white privilege. So, yes, absolutely. My direct ancestors were not part of that, but somewhere along the line, they must have been. So,
Okay.
therefore, I have to take responsibility, and I do have to understand this. And I knew this. So, what happened? I have this thing, Kushal, that does that every time I do my food supermarket shopping. First thing I do is go down to the back of the supermarket to the milk section, and I get one of those strong iced coffees, and I take it and I drink it as I'm doing my food shopping. And I have done this probably since I started food shopping when I moved out. I've done that all the time, and then I pay for the empty container at the end. About probably maybe at the start of the year, I went into a supermarket, and I've always understood. I've always understood what's gone on behind the scenes, and I've never wanted to use it to my advantage. But you can't help it because it's there, and you don't even know that you've got it sometimes. And I went into a supermarket, did the same thing, went down to the milk aisle, got my drink, and I'm halfway through drinking, and I'm still doing my shopping. Another woman was there, and she was a person of colour, and she did exactly the same thing as me, and somebody pulled her over and was confronting her about what she was doing.
Sure.
Now, it was that moment that it hit me. I'm 45 years old, and I have done this every week since I was probably 18 years old, and I've never, ever been questioned about it. Somebody else does it, and they experience a completely different feeling. So if that happens in my life, what other ways am I getting white privilege that I'm not even knowing about?
I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a beautiful attitude to want to take responsibility for something like that. But I'll let you finish.
I need to take responsibility for that, and so therefore I feel like if I don't take responsibility, then I'm believing that it's privilege and that I deserve it, and I am no more deserving of having that drink than anybody else.
Okay, well, let me ask you this: Do you think that there are certain privileges that that people of all different ethnicities have? Because I mean, I can tell you that look, I've definitely experienced a lot of racism, particularly in my youth when I was like 9, 8 years old. It'd be called black shit. You know, people would like just outright say the worst things to me. But having said that, particularly around high school, I would get a lot of black privilege. I mean, people would assume that I was a good dancer. People would assume that, I was well endowed. There are plenty of benefits that you get. I mean, the fact that I am from West Africa, Ghana, and one of the things that I've noticed consistently is that people from that part of the world, they tend to be very good runners. As a result, everyone I knew would always end up either getting some kind of scholarship due to athletics. Like I actually ended up competing in the nationals. I got plenty of opportunities because of the fact that I had certain athletic abilities that typically I would say come from people of the diaspora. So, but there are definitely certain advantages that I've definitely had. And you have a look in the United States, there is a lot of inequity that goes on there. And obviously there's white privilege, but the point I'm trying to make is that there are definitely benefits that you get being black. There are so many people that I know that have gotten, because of affirmative action, have gotten plenty of opportunities, and because of their God-given gifts, just based off of their ethnicity, like being talented at sports, they've had certain privileges. They've had certain opportunities because they excel at things that come naturally to someone that is of that ethnicity. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. Granted that there are certain privileges that you get, obviously being someone that is identified as being white, there are also privileges that you get as being black. And whereas I understand your point that you feel because you're benefiting from these things and the fact that people of your ethnicity, even though maybe not directly connected to your ancestry but somehow affiliated, have done certain things and now you're benefiting from that. I think if I'm going to be completely honest, because I want to have an open, honest conversation about this, there are people of my ancestry that have done certain things. I mean, a lot of people forget that the first slave owners were actually black kings, that the North Africans had a many-year history of actually enslaving the Slavic people. In fact, the word slave comes from the Slavic word comes from Slav, and the North Africans actually spent a tremendous amount of time enslaving the Slavic people, putting them in the worst conditions you can possibly imagine. And the fact that we are I mean, granted, this happened many hundreds of years ago. I feel like a lot of the times people, when they're making this argument, they want to overlook the fact that black people as well, people of the diaspora, have benefited from things that their ancestors that have done. My ancestry, the Ashanti Empire, they had a 1,000-year history of slavery. They did some horrible stuff as well. But the thing is, ancestry is a huge deal with West Africans, to the point where I get into a lot of arguments with my fellow brothers and sisters, because my attitude is I don't feel like I should be held accountable for things that my ancestors did. In fact, if I found out my ancestors did amazing things, I'm like, oh, that's really cool, you know. But I don't feel like I want to be judged by the actions that I've done as opposed to the things that my ancestors have done. So whether it's good or bad, if they were slave owners or if they did the best things, the idea of saying that I as an individual now have to suffer because of what my ancestors did, it creates this system where we're constantly being held accountable for things that we ourselves have not done. And granted, I understand your point that we're benefiting from things that our ancestors have done, but I think we all are, regardless of whether we're black or white. So I just feel like at some point we have to acknowledge that both parties have had ancestors. Because look, if you want to be honest about this, you can make the argument that we all are related, because if you go back far enough, I mean, I don't know if you want to buy into this, but we all come from Africa. Maybe, maybe not. Therefore, at some point we were all connected.
Can I just say, I would even
sure.
go further than that. I mean, for me, I'm a very spiritual person, so we are all connected anyway. We're
That's
all
how I
one.
feel.
I mean, I don't actually believe that there are cultures and there, you know, you do something your way, and you know your culture does something your way, and I do something my way.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you know, we have exactly the same things inside of us. We both have a heart. We both love. We both feel. We both have lungs. We both have kidneys. We both have all of these things, and so we are exactly the same. We all have feelings. So I actually don't. When I think about it, I think of the human race. We are one human race.
That's right. There's only one race.
What country? What piece of land you come from? What piece of land you come from is incredible. It is irrelevant to me.
But
because just because you were born on one piece of land and I was born on another, and my auntie was born on one and another, and all of that, at the end of the day, we're right here and we're here together.
Absolutely.
And there is an energy force that keeps us all connected, which
that
is
exactly
why we wanted to travel,
feel.
which is why we need this human connection, which is why above all of these things, the most important thing that people are missing is human connection. Because
Sure.
I need you, Krishel, to survive. You need me. Now, you may only need me for this moment, but you still need me. And it does not diminish its value whether you are the most important person in my life or whether you are somebody I spend an hour with or a friend that I chat to every couple of months. You are valuable in my life. And it doesn't matter where you come from in the world or what happens or who you are or what your ancestors have done or who they've done and who's done this or whatever it is. That's all irrelevant to me. I need you to live.
Absolutely.
And I need everybody else. I need the person at the supermarket. I need the doctor. I need the person that's going to fix my car. I need the person that I just say hi to down the street. That's what I need.
That's what you need.
And you
That's
need
what
exactly
I need.
the same.
That's what we all need. You see,
You know?
there are two very different conversations that are being had in the world at the moment. One is this: it's us versus them, as in it's, you know, black versus white, or, you know, the rich versus poor. It's like it's this separation mentality. And then there's more of an inclusive conversation. Like, I think so much of these issues arise from us wanting to see separation, us wanting to look at each other as the enemy. And one of the issues that I have is, look, granted, I come from Ghana, West Africa, and look, I've been brought up in a black community, but I have friends from all different parts of the world. You know, I have Christian values. I have this attitude that we're all God's creatures. And as soon as people, I've had people have this conversation with me, typically from my culture, that view this thing so combatively. They kind of say that, you know, white people, they can't, you know, you can't trust them, all this kind of stuff. And then I see this other world out there where, you know, I see the same thing happening from certain members, you know, like Ku Klux Klan, about wanting to see each other as as inferior. And I think as long as you look at people as being so separate from you, the fact that they've done something wrong, the fact that they're benefiting from their things that they have no control over, therefore they're the enemy, it's always going to create this distrust. And I think at some point, like Martin Luther King obviously perpetuating his speech, that people should be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character. But as long as you're always seeing people as a reflection of things that their ancestors have done, it perpetuates this group mentality of, well, they're, because of them being connected to so-and-so ancestors and so forth, I can't treat them the same way because they have more culpability in the current system at play. Whereas I would rather treat someone as an individual and say, look, you are a beautiful person because of the things that you have done in this day, and I love you regardless of the color of your skin. And I see so much of the conversation that's going on now about, I have met people that immediately hate someone just because of the color of the skin. And regardless of how you want to justify that to me is racist. And it doesn't, me personally.
Absolutely, that's
well,
racist.
Of course, I know
but
you
know what
agree
it
with
is? It's because
it's
just because they've got we have. You think of all the things that we're taught, as and I say this because the reason I say that we need to take some sort of responsibility is because because as a human race, I need to take responsibility to repair what has happened to people. And I need to be able to make sure that I don't then teach it to my children, that I teach them kindness, that I teach them this exact same thing. I teach them that there is one race. It doesn't matter about where you come from in the world, how much money you've got, what religion you are. It doesn't, all of those things don't matter. And that is my responsibility to make sure that I teach my children that.
That's a beautiful attitude.
And they will have a different thing. My husband, right? My husband has dark skin. So I've had people say to me, I actually had my son say to me through this whole Black Lives Matter, he's 11 years old, and he said to me, I'm confused. I'm half enemy and half victim.
Oh, no.
And I said, right, okay. And he said, Mum, are you the enemy? And I sat down and I explained it the best part. And I said, well, in some parts, yes, I am. And in some parts, no, I'm not. I personally am not the enemy. Has my history done that? Yes, it has.
But aren't we part of the same history? When are we talking about separation
we are part
here?
of the same. Well, we are talking about, but I think that we also need to. But I also do think that we need to know where we've come from. I do also think that we need to understand and know our history. Look, a perfect example of this is my family came from Italy, and after the war, Hitler took all of the patents of all different important things that Germany had made, things like cars, and which is why German cars are so important and so valuable, because they were able to start off on the forefront of being able to have all these patents straight away, because Hitler knew when the war was actually ending that he needed to make sure that Germany had some sort of value. And one of the things that he took was printing machines. And so once the war was over, Germany had the patents on all the printing machines, and then was going up around Europe and starting all these printing companies. And my grandfather was able to get a job from that and was able to get money. And so he had quite a good job. And by having quite a good job, they were able to sell, also took patents on sewing machines and just different things that were inventions. And my grandmother was a seamstress, so my grandmother was able to get different, was able to benefit from that, and that meant my family actually benefited from that, earned an income from that. Then all of a sudden, they lost their jobs, and they migrated to Australia. My grandfather was actually able to come to Australia and then had all of this experience in printing. My grandmother had all of this experience in sewing machines. Now, they would not have had that unless they came from a country that was next door to a country, was related to a country that had brought this in and been able to give them that experience. So when my family came to Australia, they were able to get jobs and be able to be much more experienced in the printing industry and was able to get jobs in printing newspapers. And my grandmother was doing. Why? Because they came from an area that had been able to get this from making sure that racism was built on racism.
Okay.
Their opportunities were built on racism. So my family had an advantage from that. What I look at that
I see the argument you're making. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So if your family came here to Australia and didn't have that background and didn't have that, but you had it in other areas. Now, it's interesting because my husband, being black, has also said to me, has exactly the same opinion of you. He doesn't believe in white privilege. He doesn't believe in it. He says, I get privilege from other areas.
I believe in it.
I get privilege.
I want to be clear about this. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's just I think we all have different privilege. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
He says the same thing. He says the same thing to me. He says to me, I get privilege in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's Indian, and people automatically think he's smart and well educated.
Yeah, thrifty. Good shopper. Absolutely.
You know, like constantly, he's like, people will always say, "Oh, your husband's really smart."
Yeah.
Now he actually is really smart, but you don't even know him, and you are assuming that he's really, really smart. So he gets privileges in other areas because of his culture. So he always says to me, "You get something, I get something. You get something, I get something."
Absolutely.
But I also I do have a strong belief that we do need to know our history. We do need to know where we've come from so that I can also learn from that, and I can learn from how that's affecting me in my life.
Absolutely.
So directly, from one generation, from my grandparents, I'm directly have benefited from racism through
I understand
that way.
understand the perspective. Generally speaking, particularly in West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, it's pretty much a cornerstone of African mentality. That ancestry plays a huge part in who you are. I have this conversation a lot with my family, my stepbrother, and even my name. I got into trouble one time because I don't use my middle name, which is supposed to represent your tribe. It's Yao. But I go by Krishna, which is an Indian name, because my dad had more of a hippie mentality, kind of had this whole we're all one kind of mentality. But the argument that you're making, I respect that, and I think it's beautiful. Anytime people want to take accountability, they feel, I think anytime you take on more responsibility, you have more ability to change the world. And it's a beautiful attitude when people have that mentality. I also try to be very consistent about the arguments that I make, though, and I think if we're being honest about this, I mean, this is a philosophical idea, but basically all creations are built on the creations of others, and all progress that we've seen in society has come about, unfortunately, through horrible things that have happened in the past. We have a look at the inventions that came about from the First and Second World War that we are benefiting from now. The internet, the fact that this was created by the defense, DARPA. I mean, there's pretty much everything that you're seeing around you has had some roots from horrible things, from let's say the North Africans conquering parts of Europe, doing horrible things and spurring about inventions that came about from that, and people have been able to use this to do X and Y. This idea that because we're benefiting from things that are tarnished, I mean, if it's the fruit from the poisonous tree argument, it's fair enough to accept that, but if we are going to accept that, we have to be consistent. Just like you're saying that you benefited from the fact that your ancestors had this printing business, they benefited from that. Equally so, there are going to be areas, regardless of what race you are, where your ancestry has benefited, and you're inheriting those benefits. And if we're being really honest about it, because this is so relevant, your son has both your ancestry and the ancestry of your husband. Now, you find that, granted, that's more transparent to him because he's obviously biracial. That applies to you in some sense. And granted, you have Italian ancestry. You probably have ancestry from different parts of the world as well, not just Italian, but Europe, and you probably, unbeknownst to you, probably have some African ancestry at some point. One of my favorite videos,
I'm sure I have.
Is this video where they actually they bring all these people from different parts of the world, and they hate each other, right? Like they're the Turkish that hate, I know, Greeks, and you have what they're racist, the Ku Klux Klan members, and they do a DNA test. And then you find out that they have people in that room that are related to them from countries that they absolutely hate. And you realize very quickly that we all have DNA. But granted, we tend to have this, narrow-minded perspective where, oh, I am black and I'm Italian, if you go back far enough. And I believe that, yes, there's something to ancestry. We're all benefiting from this. It shapes who we are. But if we go back far enough, it's not this clear-cut, you're black, you're white, you're Italian. It's this amorphous idea, and we're all connected to each other in differing degrees. And I find it weird when people only identify with one race. Like, you see biracial people a lot of the times. They're both white, both black, but they say, I'm a black man, and I'm victimized, I'm persecuted. Equally so, you also have white ancestry. So are you going to accept how about someone like me? Now, I look black, granted, to most people. Most West Africans are obviously considered black. But the reality is, if you have a look at the history, for instance, the Dutch, they had a lot of influence in Ghana. My mother is a bit lighter in complexion to me because she comes from a tribe called Funti, where the Dutch people actually came and they had consensual relations. They got along very well. Therefore, you find people towards the coast of Ghana, they tend to be lighter in skin color. And they had wars with people in other parts of Ghana, like the Airway tribe, or they tend to be darker. But we all have ancestry from different parts of the world. And I find it weird how people want to divide things so conveniently and say, I'm black, I'm white, therefore we're different. When realistically, if we're going to be as honest as we can be about this thing, we're all probably connected in differing levels. And I would think we're just conveniently saying, you know what, I'm black, therefore I'm victimized. And I just feel it's this really weird conversation, and it's so much easier if we accept the fact that we're all living under the same skies. We're all humans. And granted, there are horrible things that our ancestors have done. At some point, we have to get past that and work together. Take responsibility as a human being, and I do, for all of the horrible things that all of society have done, black and white. But to work forward from that. As an individual, the problem I've had is I don't look at myself as even a human being. In the sense, I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience, and as a result,
I look at that exact same thing.
You start looking at things differently.
Do you know what I'm so excited about? I'm so excited about coming from Australia in this multicultural environment. The next generation. So for me, okay, when I say, my family was born in Italy. I'm the first one and only one that born in Australia. My husband has migrated, so he's the first people from his family that are born in Australia are my children. And my kids are going to go out, and my kids are this, mixed mash of this and that, the other, and they're going to go out and mix around with their stuff. And before you know it, in the next 50 years, Australia will look different. It will look different because you've already, my kids are looking different. So can you imagine when they hook up with your kids? Yeah.
There's a South Park episode on this.
They hook up, and then they hook up with, and it's like going to be, there won't be, especially in our country, there almost won't be. Like, I look forward to the day where skin color doesn't matter, because you'll look at a family, and my family will be the perfect one. Once I have grandchildren, that you'll go, okay, the grandmother's Italian, the dad's Indian, the kids are a latte of I don't know.
Yeah.
And, one son's married a Japanese person, the other one's married this, and look what this family looks like. What nationality
that's what I want to see.
I don't actually know. I don't actually know, because the chance of me having kids that are, Japanese looking are quite, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
And then you'd put me, my husband, my kids and my grandchildren all together, and just as a one little, and you'd go, what nationality are they? I don't know. And that will change things. That has to change things in our in our course of stuff. It has to.
Do you think
the way that things will change in 20 years, by the time my children have children, like, it'll be completely different, and I'm really excited about that, because there won't be a way of putting nationalities. There won't be, especially in a family like mine. It will be very difficult to be able to, unless my kids end up with an Italian or an Indian. There's almost going to be no way to go, what nationality are you? Well, we're born in Australia.
Sure. I see that happening already. Australia's very
that excites
multicultural.
Me.
But do you see much racism in Australia? And do you have you? Granted, you probably haven't come across this as much, but has your son experienced this? I mean, from your day-to-day observance, do you think of Australia as being a racist country?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I see it as a racist country. I see.
In what sense
I would
specifically?
say
How do you see
I
this?
would say that it's not. I would say that it's not as bad as other countries, but it certainly does have that. It does have that element where people are still naive or narrow-minded to not understand things, and racism is done very, very subtly. In I think. In For us, it's not as blatant as what it is in other countries. It's done very subtly,
That's for
and
sure.
how
You
that
should try
happens
going
to
to
me all
France,
the time.
Paris, and see what happens there. It's very blatant in your
Yeah,
face. No, we
yeah.
cannot
So
serve you.
here it's
You do
done
not.
very
You're not
subtle.
like Calais. I'm sorry.
Here it's done very, very subtly. And the
Yeah.
thing, look, I get to experience this because I go out into the world and nobody knows who I'm married to and what my family is. And people will look at me and then all of a sudden they start sprouting out this racist stuff. And do you know what I love? I
Mm-hmm.
actually, there's a little bit of me that's we all have that dark side. And the dark side in me
Mm-hmm.
loves letting someone go. I love letting them go. Like, they'll come and they'll say something and they'll say something racist
Mm-hmm.
to me, and I let them go. I let them say it all. I let them say it,
And then you tell
and
them.
say because and then I just don't really, and then I let it out. And that's my favorite thing because then I love watching them backtrack. Oh no, I didn't mean it like that. And
Yeah.
my best part is I don't actually interrupt them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't interrupt them. So I let them say whatever they've got to say. And I love it when my friends are around me because they're like, oh, Sasha's just going to go off any minute now.
Mm-hmm.
But she just lets them go because I'm going to give you the whole thing. I actually, I'm not sure if you ever heard me speak at the Australian Teenage Expo, but I have a story that I tell all the
Sure.
time.
I was there. I'm pretty. Did you speak when I
That's
did
right.
the Teenage Expo? Pretty sure I've heard you speak.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sure.
yeah,
I remember that.
absolutely.
You're a great
And
speaker,
so,
Sacha.
oh, thank you. I have this thing where you never know who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from the outside, you're right. I look like a white chick and, you have no idea what's going on in the background and what my beliefs are
Mm-hmm.
and what I feel. And I had this particular, we had this particular thing, and I always tell this story, in my seminars. I had this particular thing where we were we have, as you would know, in our events, we have about 9,000 teenagers come along. And funnily enough, in those 9,000 teenagers that come from all over Melbourne and from every different culture, and you'll have kids that are rich schools and poor schools and everything in between, and government and private and all of that sort of stuff. And you would know from your own experience, Prashul, is that we never, ever in the history of Australian Teenage Expo ever had an issue of violence or fighting between young people. The biggest issue that we had was actually amongst adults that were working at the expo. So exhibitors, people that were going, it was never the kids, it was always the adults. So we would actually get security there and people would say to us, you've got 9,000 kids, right? How many security do there? And I'm like, the 9,000 kids are easy. I need the security to take care of the adults that are working in this expo. That's how completely different it was. So, I'm there and I'm hiring these particular, I'm hiring the security for the expo, and I'm getting a quote from a couple of different companies, and I get this particular quote, and one comes back and I can't remember the actual detail, but one comes back and it's like $60 an hour, and you need this amount of guards, and then another comes back and it says you need this amount, and everyone comes back with all these different things, and it was really up to me. Anyway, one of these particular companies that I went to was referred to me by a friend. So I actually really wanted to use that company because I really wanted to support my friend's friend. And
Sure.
so they came in with a really ridiculously overpriced quote, which I thought from a recommendation was really silly. And I actually went back and I thought, well, I really want to give this guy the business. So I'm going to give him an opportunity and say to him, listen, I just want to let you know, I've had various quotes from different companies. And from those various different companies, I've had various different prices, but yours exceeds way more than everybody else's exceeds. And so because I know you through a friend, I really wanted to give you this particular opportunity. And this guy comes back, and I said it in an email. I don't know if you've heard this story, and he comes back in one sentence. One comes back in one sentence. For the price that you're looking for, all you're going to get is shitty Indians. Right? Just one price. Has no idea because who I am, what I'm doing, all of that sort of stuff. Now, it took me 24 hours because initially you want to lose your mind, you know, because I was just like, how can
but you don't want to overreact and say something you regret, yeah.
Well, I've learned very well in my life. And it's funny because all the office says, let Sasha take care of that, but just give her 24 hours because I've learned in my life that if I start going off when I feel it straight away, I'm going to say things and I don't want to. So I need to think about it. So I'm 45. I'm learning here because I'm learning on this stuff. Anyway, so I came back 24 hours later and I need to get this email because I put it up on a screen and I just answered with something basic like, you actually don't know who I am. And I think that you should, and I put a selfie of my husband and I underneath and just said, here, so maybe you should watch out what you say to people. Comes back with the lowest quote, comes back with, I'll do anything to make you happy, blah, blah, blah. Please don't tell my friend that I said this. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like this. I didn't do this, blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. Now, not only that, I have then told this story and there's no way I would even recommend it. Then when I went back to my friend, I told my friend, I said this, then they're all apologetic. The point is that you have no idea who you're talking to. Exactly. No idea. So don't rush off and say this stuff. I mean, I'm renovating my house at the moment because I'm in COVID. I get tradesmen come in and I ask them for a quote. Now, my husband's not home. Go for a quote. And then they'll literally say, well, if you do this, you'll get this culture, I'll give you this one, but I'm an Aussie bloke and I'll give you like this. And I'm like, right, even if you're the best quote ever, you've now put down 3 other cultures on the kind of work that they're going to do. There's no way I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
Now, you have no idea because my husband's not home. And I love it in the midst of that if he just walks in and they're like, okay, I can't believe I've just said that. I love people putting them in their place because I just think, how dare you just go on and assume who I am? I just think the greatest lesson is stop thinking that it's constant. And I get this constantly. One of the things that I get all the time, I can be sitting around with a group of women and as women do, we can sometimes bag our husbands a little bit and I don't have the perfect marriage and the perfect life, and we can all be sitting around and, my husband does this and my husband does that and my husband does this. The minute I say something about my husband, everybody says, yeah, I know, but you guys are culturally different. Let me tell you, my marriage problems have got nothing to do with my cultural difference. I've been married for 16 years. Let me tell you, we passed that a long time ago. Like, it happens all the time. So it's that undermining racism that annoys me. And I'm like, hang on a second, you're married to, somebody of your own culture and you sat here and said to me, oh, your husband doesn't do the dishes and that annoys you. And I'm not going to go back and go, well, that's because you're married to somebody of that culture. I say, oh, my husband annoys me, doesn't do the dishes. And you're instantly going to come back and go, yeah, but, from your culture, they don't do that kind of thing and blah, blah, blah. No, it's because my husband's selfish. That's why he's not doing the dishes. It's not because of his cultural heritage.
Absolutely. You think very much like
I
do.
What I mean? Sure. I just kind of think, what has that got to do with it? We've all sat around as a group of women and had this conversation about relationships. It's a relationship. It's not about where you come from.
Sure.
Let me
just interject there. Here's the thing. Whereas I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying here, I think there is something. I always make a distinction between race and culture because there are certain cultures that have certain ideas that are that affect the people. So, for instance, you find for instance, in Asian countries, China specifically, their idea of masculinity is very different to femininity. And I've heard many Asians educate me about this kind of stuff, how they see Westerners as being all kind of everybody look at me, attention seekers, all that kind of stuff. It's not considered to be a masculine attitude. They have more of an attitude, and this is generally speaking the cultural norm there, to be more willing to go ahead with traditions, like not to be recalcitrant. So one of these rebellious kind of people that you see portrayed in all these Hollywood movies. And the point I'm trying to make is there are cultural norms, And I mean, this is just a psychological analysis of certain situations. So it's tricky because when you make certain judgments about, and this is something that we do as human beings on certain cultures, people that come from those cultures, generally speaking, you find, for instance, people that come from the West Africa, they not only have certain physical characteristics that influence how they perform in athletics. I mean, in the 100-meter finals, it's been dominated by people from the West African diaspora since 1982. Like 95% plus people are from that, like whether it's the African Americans or the Jamaicans or the Ghanaians, Nigerians. Obviously, there's certain physical characteristics. So you say, oh, you must be fast because you're from Ghana, West Africa. It's not a racist statement. Just like you can also say certain things about like Italians. Oh, Italians, you mentioned this a while ago. You know, you like to interact with people, you like to hug, and these are things that are cultural, that because your culture has influenced you. So it just becomes a little tricky when people immediately assume that because you're making generalizations about someone based off of the culture they come from, that it must be racist, because there are clearly cultural norms. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I do agree, but I would say that because I'm in a biracial relationship, I would definitely say that I get it way more than anybody else. Because if we're all sitting around talking about the fact that our husband doesn't do the dishes, why is it that you're only talking about me in that sense? Because it's an obvious reason. So it's an obvious because we look different. But if I was talking about because I was married to an Italian guy, you know, I say this because it happens all the time, Crystal. It happens all the time. You know, I'm constantly defending our cultural background, and I'm constantly saying our issues are not our culture. Or people, the first thing that they'll say, so how did your parents cope with you guys getting together? It is the first question I get all together. My parents didn't care. What about his parents, Mum? His parents didn't care either. So you came from this is that standard kind of question.
But
so
you know what? It's a standard.
And I've been married 16 years. I'm 16 years, and I'm still answering how we got together.
But Sasha, be honest about it. Do you think a lot of Italian families, and I don't know, I've heard this from certain people, but do you find Italian families in general often have issues when they're marriages from different races? For instance, like if generally speaking in the Italian community, do you find that a lot of Italians take issues with interracial marriages, or is that not a thing?
Look, you know, people have issues with interracial marriages all over the world.
Generally speaking, from your opinion, from what you perceive is going on within the Italian community.
Look, you know,
I lost your video.
I don't know. Look, not yes and no. Yes and no. I wouldn't say there are still some people that will say that are old school and say.
Sasha, I lost your actual video. I can hear your audio, but your video footage is coming out. There we go.
Someone was just calling through.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think. Look, yes and no. I guess it's a culture that, in some people, again, it's different attitudes. But it is. Yes and no, but I get it all the time. But I know
it's because it's a norm, though. I would imagine, because it's definitely a thing within the West African community.
It's an undermining question. People don't ask it because they're interested. People ask it because there's an element of like, I kind of want to put your husband down for that. That I'm right and he's wrong. It's a feeling. Racism is a feeling.
I think it's very important to define it, though, because there are different types of it. I mean, people make judgments about what you're likely to do, and then people think they're actually better than you based off of your race.
Asking.
Sorry, go on.
Some people are genuinely asking. But other times, I can just tell that you're immediately got some sort of thought on that. Immediately. You know, I mean, you think to yourself, how many cultures of... And I guess that I experience it more because it's in my face more. The average person that was not in a biracial marriage would not experience it as much as what I experience it. You know, my business partner Sonia, she's Australian and her husband is Greek. She doesn't get the same questions.
Because they're considered Europe. I guess it's you kind of put them in the same basket. But they're different cultures, though, aren't they? Completely different.
Of course said different
But
cultures. Does
people
anyone
tend to
ever
just
say,
put
well,
them all
they,
together. This is what I find annoying. It's like, oh, you're
Yeah.
white. Let's forget your individuality, whether you're Greek, Italian, or Irish. You're white. Therefore, you enslave. Bro, I'm Jewish. My ancestors were more persecuted than your ancestors. I mean, what are we doing here? We're just generalizing. You see what
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying?
mean, that's where I come back down to we're one race and we're one group of individual people, and we all interact with energy. We all need each other. We're pack animals. We need each other. That's why this is so important. That we bring ourselves together. It's really important. And so I guess that, look, I'm talking about this to you because it's something that's in my life.
Sure.
I know that, we get a lot of the time, people don't assume that we're married. People don't, constantly will go, oh, are you together? Or because my kids are probably have a lighter skin color, I get a lot of people who'll make fun of my husband, say, oh, you don't have very strong genes because your kids are white. You've got two
I'm
kids.
sorry, I
and
shouldn't be
they're
laughing,
both
but that's kind of funny.
I know, is that like
But
that's
a
look,
thing.
he
Like, just
laughs.
because
He
two black
laughs all the
parents have
time.
often produced white offspring. There's a genetic reason for that. People
Yeah.
just assume though because of the color of
my
your skin
kids could
that denotes your race.
My kids could have a kid that's as dark as my husband. My
Yeah.
husband's as dark as you. So my
And then there's
kids could just have an
vitiligo, people that
offspring.
look white, like Michael Jackson, that are actually
Yeah.
black. May not act like it. People, get me some tissues, but they're black. They suddenly dance like they're black. But all these assumptions. This is what it comes down to. We're making assumptions when assumptions are not necessarily truth. People look at you and think, oh, Sasha is this. Maybe I know some people do this. She's not this and that. She would never date a black man. When I know that you tend to love the chocolate, don't you? Or then you're the most like
Well, you know what? Can I
loving
tell
person of all different
Actually-
races that I know. So it's just the assumptions people make. They don't often realize who you are because they just assume you are based off of the perception they have of you. And I don't like allowing someone's perception of me to become my reality, And I feel like you have a
do you know
similar
what's
attitude.
really interesting is that I look back and think I grew up in a family where I had it thrown at me severely that racism was never allowed in our household. Never. In fact, we would, I'm so proud of the fact that my mum was, my parents were so forward thinking and kind of like this was not going to be allowed. And from an early age, I was taught that everybody is equal, and I was taught this whole that we're one energy and skin color doesn't matter and cultures don't matter. And so I guess that's probably why, I've had a chocolate preference. I don't know, because it was put in my face that you're going to love it, right, whether you like it or not. And then I kind of went, all right, I'll take it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the opposite with me because I was born in a culture where my parents were like, we want to make sure that you marry a beautiful black woman. These white people, they will not cook for you. You cannot dress. And I'm like, what are you playing? I like vanilla babes. I don't care about girl being able to cook for me.
I'm telling you, I actually think I had it pushed into me so much that I actually never even saw white, because I remember, I remember never really thinking that. I always never really thought that a white person was a white guy was attractive. So it was kind of like, when people
Sasha.
like you get, I know, isn't it?
It's
oh my
not. It's
God.
just your preference. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
it was, and I've actually seen people say like, that there's fetishes, like cultural fetishes. I mean, we're really getting into this topic now. Cultural fetishes.
But this is important,
right?
because I mean,
and I look at that and I go, hang on a second. I'm not saying that there aren't that one person that go, oh, I want to sleep with that culture, because everybody has that thing. Oh, I wouldn't mind giving that a go. I reckon my husband has this Brazilian thing. Like, he's into Brazilian chicks hardcore. Like, there's a Brazilian chick that walks past, he's like checking her out, and I'm always like going, if you go to work, I can tell you now, right? My husband, if there's a woman that's Brazilian and he'll hire her and interview her, he'll hire her just because she's Brazilian. And I'm like, you'll bring in the chocolates, you bring in the Brazilians, and we're all happy together.
But it's funny how that happens, and we don't tend to call that racist.
But does that make it? No, because he's like,
I am very much like that.
He thinks that Brazilians, like, he just thinks, like a Brazilian chick will come on, and he's so into narcos and watching that. And I'm like, you're only watching the drug shows, right? Because of the Brazilian chicks in the background, right? And so and I'm not saying that there aren't people that have that, but then there is that thing where you go, there's a preference. It's kind of like some people go, I like blondes, or I like redheads, or
Absolutely.
I like people with curly hair.
And it's not even a physical component. It's a cultural component. I'm a xenophile. I like people from different cultures. It's interesting to me. I want to learn about people that I'm not familiar with. It's like grass is greener. Does that make me like the fact that I'm more interested in people that are completely different to me? What is that? Is that like some positive discrimination? There's nothing wrong with it. I think anyway.
Don't think I could ever go out with an Aussie. Is that really racist? I just don't think I could.
You're about as anti-racist as you can get. Like you're.
I couldn't, except for I just can't imagine it. I just can't imagine. I just a couple of my friends have been on Tinder and all of that, and I'm like swiping, going, where are they? Where is a good looking one? I can't find one. And they're like, you've gone through 500. I go, I can't even find one, which is so wrong, because people might say, oh, she's not attractive. I'm not doing it. But it's not about that. It's about a preference. And so I don't look at it as a fetish. I look at it as a preference. It's kind of like when people go, I like a tall, dark and handsome guy. Okay, you like guys that have dark hair.
Yeah.
I like this. I like that. And that doesn't mean and I could probably guess that I got it, because in my family when I was growing up, it was in my face. Racism, to scrub it out, was in my face. From my grandparents, my mum's side was in my face. I don't really remember it too much I spent more time with my mum's family than I did with my dad. So I don't really remember it in that sense. But I know that my dad was very big on cultural. My dad travelled and, all of that sort of stuff. So culture was huge in my house. So I kind of grew up thinking that the world was all one. I also grew up with, lots of family members being gay. So I didn't even know that. Wasn't even a thing. I mean, like my mum's best friend was a guy who was gay, and he was in a relationship for a really long time, and they would sleep over our house all the time. Like they would go out and sleep over. They'd stay over in the spare room and all of that sort of stuff. And I didn't even know anything. And I remember being in high school when people would say that, and I was like, "What is that? Is that not right? Like, huh?"
Yeah.
Like I literally remember people saying, "Oh, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I remember coming home saying, I've heard that people are saying that two guys sleeping together is not right. And Mum's like, where'd you hear this crap? You know what I mean? Like, and it was distorting, because I'd hear all this stuff at school, and then it was not like that in my home. And so I think that the only time I ever questioned it, and not questioned, but what I did then, the greatest gift that it gave me was that a group of my friends had none of those experiences. They grew up in I went to obviously a predominantly white school. So none of my friends had any of those experiences. They'd never ever had any cultural differences. They'd never ever known any gay people. They'd never ever known anyone outside of that normal within what you would call the Aussie family of two white people, and no one ever goes and does anything different. And I remember bringing up these arguments very, very early on in the piece with my friends, and we are still all best friends now. And I know that my words to them, I didn't argue with them, I educated them on what was going on in my life, has impacted them greatly. And they all say to me now, you, for the first time in my life, Sasha, at 15, were the first person that made me go, oh, like, it's not that way that my parents have told me. And if there's anything, I'm so grateful for that, because now they're so open to all of these things.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes someone standing in who they are, the truth, in order to inspire other people to change their attitude. So I feel you're one of those people.
Even in a sense of that, I even say, like, I even have conversations. My girlfriends and I, there's 8 of us, and between us, we've got I think there's 15 kids or something like that between us all. And, the other night I said to them, we were putting on different masks, right? testing out these different masks, and we had a bit of a FaceTime. We were testing out these masks and how to make them look good. And I put on a mask that was, rainbow colours. And I said, hey, guys, I've already got my mask ready for when one of our kids is gay. And then everyone went, oh. And I said, guys, there's 15 of them. We've produced 15 kids. Let's not be naive here, right? And not think that at least 2 of them are going to be gay. Right? And they're kind of going, oh, yeah. And I said, well, let me tell you, I'm ready to roll because I'm going to the Gay Pride March with which one of our kids are gay. And so, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah. And so I'm kind of saying, I'm already forward thinking and going, I have different conversations with my kids when it comes to this sort of stuff, very different conversations. I'm not saying when you get married and you get a girlfriend, because I have 2 boys. And so I'm not saying those things. I say to them, when you meet someone and you have a relationship, because I don't want to set my kids up and for them to think that they're setting me up for failure. That all their life I've told them, when you get married and you get a girlfriend, when you get married and you get a girlfriend, when you get married and you get a girlfriend, and then one day they're going to go, I can't tell Mum that it's a boy, or whatever it might be. I can't tell Mum because she's been saying that she's going to have a girlfriend, da-da-da-da. And so I don't ever want them to feel that. So I literally am already using language that says, when you have a relationship with whoever that might be, from whatever culture they might come from, whatever gender they may identify with, when you have a relationship with another human being, that's what I'm trying to tell. That is when I say my legacy. That is what I'm trying to say by me taking responsibility. My heritage has done things to hurt people, whether it be culturally, whether it be about racism, whether it be about sexism, whatever it be. It is my responsibility as a female that is 45 with 2 children. It is my responsibility to therefore teach my children to not think like that and to be very open-minded and to think, if it was my way, we'd have no passports and there'd be no borders. But I'm sure there's people thinking to themselves, what would do? But that's what I believe. Why do you need to get into my country? Why do you need some identity? I'm not saying we don't need identification, but what do I need to pay someone $700 to give me a book that says, and pay a visa to get into your country? You know what I mean? I'm not saying that if you've committed crimes and all of that sort of stuff, but as a person like myself or whatever it is, I just think that I need to teach my kids, and I also need to make sure that I teach your kids that. And I believe it, the old saying, takes a village to raise a child, which is why I go out there to schools and teach what I teach, because I love it. And it's benefited me. I've had a very rich experience in my life I've had lots of travel. I've been able to experience different things. I've been able to see the world, that we're all one. I've had, great adventures where, I remember I was 26, and I'd just come out of a relationship, and it was awful. It was an awful relationship. And my parents went to Africa, and, I was 25, 26, and it was really awful relationship. And I'd come out, and my parents were going to Africa, and they said to me, do you want to come? And I said, no. Anyway, like a week or so before they were going, I was like, stuff this, I'm putting all my savings. And I went, and it was the greatest experience of my life. And I couldn't get a flight home, and I was in Zimbabwe for 3 days by myself. And I went and stayed at a women's only market. And I went and stayed there with these women. And for 3 days, I went there and I sat around with these women in like the middle of nowhere, with dirt on the floor. And I sat with these women that were all my age, and we talked about relationships that were abusive and hurt our soul. And I realized then, more than ever, we're all one, because here were these women that had absolutely nothing, and they felt exactly the same way that I felt.
Yeah.
And it changed me. Those experiences changed me.
It's a beautiful story. Sacha, we could talk about this for another hour. I try to keep these things down to an hour, though, and we've gone almost into the 1.5 hours, and we'll have to do this. No, thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing these amazing stories with me and giving us your insights in regards to life, race, and just being all connected, you know? We will definitely have to come get you back here again and talk about all the amazing work that you're involved in. We didn't really get a chance.
We were supposed to talk about Bitcoin. I lost money on Bitcoin too.
Perhaps another time. But Sacha, look, yeah. I know it's been tough for you. It's been tough for a lot of people out there. Keep being the amazing, wonderful person you are, because you inspire so many people by just being you. And hopefully we can all get through this, eh?
I love you so much, darling. And from the moment I met you, I just fell madly in love with you because you're such a beautiful soul. And I remember us having a conversation at our kitchen table with my mum. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. Met some very cool people that day.
Yeah, and
including
we just were sitting around in my kitchen table, and we all just were talking about being spiritual, and I just knew, and I think when you connect on a spiritual level with somebody, you know that there's an energy force, and you and I have that, and I love you, and I'm grateful for you in my life, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you, Sacha. I love you too, and thank you for being who you are. You are a beautiful soul, and it is an honor to call you my friend. And thanks for coming on the Christian Journey podcast.
Likewise.
You'll have to come on again.
All right.
All right, Sacha,
Beautiful.
Thanks again.
And what's that Bubba Dubba do? How do I do that thing? What's that shakalaka laka?
Boom shakalaka.
What is it?
Is that what I say?
Boom shakalaka. I'm going to finish on that. Boom shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka, girl. You take care. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
God bless.
Love you. Bye-bye.
Love you
Bye.
too. Bye-bye. Wow. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there's the amazing Sacha. She's got a podcast amongst many other amazing things that she's working on. I will put her details on this video. Be sure to send her some love. Until next time, this is Chris Yule. Peace out. Keep it real. Don't drive and text. Ow!
The battle was over before the game was done. Now if you think that I'm gonna let you run my body, my heart, and my mind, then you better listen, son. Oh, you think you're invaluable, yeah, act like you made it gold. Think you're gonna soar like a bird, be on a